Pray first, not because you are weak, but because you understand how life is designed to work. Prayer is not a last resort for desperate people. It is the first response of those who know their source. When you wake up in the morning, before your feet touch the ground, before your mind begins to race with worries, plans, and responsibilities, you must acknowledge the one who supplies all needs. Life was never meant to be lived independent of its creator. Disconnection from the source is the beginning of depletion, but connection through prayer is the beginning of provision. God is not a reactionary God. He does not wait for emergencies to decide what to do. He is a supplier, not a responder. Everything you will need today, strength, wisdom, peace, favor, clarity, protection, has already been prepared. Prayer does not convince God to give. Prayer positions you to receive. When you pray first, you are aligning yourself with heaven's order. You are declaring that your confidence is not in your job, your bank account, your education, or your connections, but in the God who owns all things and sustains all life. Many people pray only when they run out, but those who understand purpose pray before they begin. When you pray first, you are acknowledging that you are not self-sufficient. Independence may impress people, but dependence on God releases power. The greatest strength of a believer is knowing where their supply comes from. God never intended you to carry life alone. Anxiety is the result of trying to manage tomorrow with today's limited strength. Prayer transfers the burden from your shoulders to His BR. God supplies all needs, not some needs. He supplies visible needs and invisible needs. He supplies the need for food, and He supplies the need for peace. He supplies finances, and He supplies wisdom. He supplies opportunities, and He supplies patience to wait for the right ones. When you pray first, you invite God into every dimension of your life, not just the spiritual one. There is no separation between sacred and daily life when God is your source. Your work, your family, your dreams, your decisions, all of them require divine supply. Prayer in the morning is a declaration of trust. You are saying, before I speak to people, I will speak to God. Before I respond to problems, I will respond to heaven. This is not about long words or impressive language. It's about alignment. A simple prayer spoken with faith opens the door to supernatural provision. God responds to faith, not noise. He honors humility, not performance. When you pray first, you are also establishing authority over your day. You are setting the spiritual atmosphere before circumstances try to shape it for you. Instead of reacting to fear, you are releasing faith. Instead of starting the day confused, you are starting it connected. Prayer does not change God, it changes you. It sharpens your discernment so you can recognize what is necessary and what is a distraction. God's supply is not limited by the economy, the season, or your past. He is not intimidated by your lack. In fact, lack is often the stage upon which His provision is revealed. What matters is not how big the need is, but how great the source is. When you pray first, you stop magnifying the problem and start magnifying God. You begin to see solutions where others see obstacles. BR morning prayer is an act of surrender. You are saying, God, I submit my plans, my desires, my expectations to you. And in that surrender, you receive guidance. God does not just supply what you ask for. He supplies what you didn't even know you needed. He supplies divine timing. He supplies protection from wrong decisions. He supplies strength to endure seasons that cannot be rushed. Those who pray first live differently. They move with confidence, not arrogance. They work diligently, but they rest in trust. They are not driven by fear of tomorrow because they have already placed tomorrow in God's hands. Prayer keeps your heart anchored when life becomes uncertain. It reminds you that you are not alone and you were never meant to be WR. So this morning, pray first. Before the phone calls, before the meetings, before the challenges, before the expectations, pray first. Acknowledge the God who supplies all needs. Thank Him for what He has already provided. Trust Him for what is yet to come. And walk into this day with assurance, knowing that when God is your source, lack is temporary, but provision is guaranteed. Prayer was never designed to be an emergency button that we press only when life is falling apart. It was designed to be the starting point of every day and the foundation of every decision. When prayer becomes the last option, it reveals that we have already trusted our own strength, our own wisdom, and our own plans first. But when prayer becomes the first response, it shows that we understand how life truly works. Everything that is created functions best when it remains connected to its source, and human life is no different. The moment we disconnect from God, we begin to rely on limited resources, and limitation always produces stress. Many people wait until they are overwhelmed before they pray. They try to fix situations with effort, strategy, and control, and only when those fail do they turn to God. By that time, fear has already taken root. Confusion has clouded judgment, and peace has been replaced by pressure. Prayer at the beginning would have prevented the burden at the end. When you pray first, you are not admitting weakness, you are demonstrating wisdom. You are acknowledging that your capacity is finite, but God's capacity is unlimited. Prayer as a first response shifts your mindset from reaction to alignment. Instead of responding emotionally to circumstances, you align spiritually with truth. You stop allowing situations to define your mood and start allowing God to shape your perspective. When you pray before you act, you invite divine insight into human decisions. This is why prayer brings clarity. It slows your spirit enough to hear direction and sharpens your discernment so you can recognize what truly matters. Praying first also establishes authority over your day. It is a declaration that your life will not be controlled by urgency, fear, or pressure. When you speak to God before speaking to people, you carry peace into every conversation. When you submit your plans to God before executing them, you avoid unnecessary struggle. Many conflicts, delays, and disappointments are not attacks from the enemy, but results of acting without alignment. Prayer saves time because it prevents costly mistakes. Choosing prayer first also reorders your trust. Trust is revealed by what you turn to first. If your first response is worry, then fear is leading you. If your first response is planning without prayer, then self-reliance is leading you. But if your first response is prayer, then faith is leading you. Faith does not ignore responsibility. It places responsibility under divine guidance. Prayer does not remove effort. It directs effort. .br. When prayer leads, peace follows. Peace is not the absence of problems. It is the presence of confidence in God's involvement. Prayer reminds you that you are not facing life alone. It reconnects you with purpose, renews your strength, and restores your focus. Starting with prayer means you are no longer chasing control. You are embracing cooperation with God. And when God is involved from the beginning, the outcome is never left to chance. Everything in life depends on understanding the difference between a source and a resource. A resource can run out, be delayed, or fail, but a source is self-sustaining and unlimited. When people confuse resources with the source, they place their trust in systems that were never designed to carry that weight. Jobs can be lost, businesses can slow down, economies can shift, and people can disappoint, but God remains constant. Recognizing God as the source changes how you view everything else in your life. Money, opportunities, skills, and connections are no longer your security. They become channels through which the true supplier works. When God is seen as the source, pressure is removed from people and possessions. You stop expecting your job to give you peace, your salary to give you confidence, or your relationships to give you identity. Those things were never designed to supply your deepest needs. They are tools, not foundations. When a tool breaks, you do not panic if you know where it came from. You simply return to the source. In the same way, when a resource is threatened or removed, faith remains steady because the source is untouched. Understanding God as the source also transforms how you handle lack. Lack no longer produces fear, it produces expectation. Instead of asking, "What will I do now?" you begin to ask, "How will God supply this?" This mindset shift is powerful because it removes desperation. Desperation leads people to compromise, rush decisions, and accept what is less than God's best. But confidence in the source allows patience. You can wait without anxiety because you know provision is not dependent on one door, one person, or one opportunity. Seeing everything else as a resource also restores proper stewardship. When you know that what you have came from God, you stop clinging to it in fear of losing it. You manage it with wisdom and generosity. You no longer see provision as something to hoard, but something to handle responsibly. God does not supply so you can become independent of Him. He supplies so you can remain dependent on Him with confidence. Resources flow best through hands that are open, not clenched. This understanding also protects you from pride in seasons of abundance. When resources increase, many people begin to think they are the source. Success can quietly replace dependence if you're not careful. But when you remember that God is the source, gratitude stays alive. You work diligently, but you remain humble. You plan wisely, but you continue to pray. You enjoy provision without becoming enslaved to it. When God is your source, disappointment loses its power. Rejection from people no longer defines you. Delays no longer discourage you. Closed doors no longer destroy your hope. You understand that if one channel closes, the source remains fully capable of opening another. C produces stability in unstable times. Your confidence is not rooted in what you have, but in who supplies it. Living with God as the source and everything else as a resource brings freedom. Freedom from fear, freedom from striving, and freedom from anxiety about tomorrow. You stop chasing provision and start trusting provision. And when your trust is anchored in the source, your life becomes steady, focused, and full of peace, regardless of external conditions. But prayer does not create provision, it creates alignment. Many people misunderstand prayer as a way to persuade God to act, as if He were unaware of their needs or unwilling to provide. In reality, provision already exists before the request is made. God operates from completeness, not shortage. What prayer does is position the heart, the mind, and the life to receive what has already been prepared. When you pray, you are not informing God, you are aligning yourself with His will, His timing, and His order. Alignment is essential because even the greatest supply is useless if you are positioned incorrectly. A signal may be strong, but without proper alignment, there is no connection. Prayer is that alignment. It adjusts your perspective so that your desires come into agreement with God's purpose. Many frustrations in life come not from lack of provision, but from misalignment with it. People often pray for answers while remaining positioned in places that cannot sustain the answers they seek. Prayer positions you internally before it positions you externally. It reshapes your thinking, corrects your motives, and refines your expectations. Sometimes God does not immediately change the situation because the real adjustment needs to happen within you. Prayer prepares your character to handle the blessing without being damaged by it. Provision without preparation can become a burden rather than a blessing. Through prayer, patience is developed, wisdom is increased, and discernment is sharpened. Alignment through prayer also synchronizes you with divine timing. Many things fail not because they are wrong, but because they are early or late. Prayer slows you down enough to move in step with God rather than ahead of Him. When you are aligned with His timing, doors open with less resistance and progress feels guided rather than forced. You stop striving to make things happen and start recognizing when God is making them happen. Prayer positions you to recognize provision when it appears. Often, answers come in forms we did not expect. Without prayer, people overlook opportunities because they are focused on a specific outcome rather than divine direction. Prayer trains your spirit to discern God's movement in subtle ways. You begin to see solutions where others see interruptions. You recognize favor in conversations, ideas, and unexpected connections. Alignment sharpens awareness. Prayer also positions you to receive peace while you wait. Waiting becomes easier when you know you are aligned. Anxiety is often the result of uncertainty about direction. Prayer removes that uncertainty by anchoring your heart in trust. Even when provision has not yet manifested physically, you carry assurance internally. That assurance sustains faith during delay and keeps hope alive. When you understand that prayer positions rather than pressures God, your approach to prayer changes. It becomes less about urgency and more about surrender, less about demanding and more about trusting. You pray with confidence, not desperation. And when alignment is established, provision flows naturally. What God has already prepared finds you in the right place, at the right time, with the right heart to receive it. The way you begin your day determines the direction your day will take. Morning prayer is not a ritual. It is an act of leadership over your life. Before the demands of the day compete for your attention, prayer allows you to establish the spiritual atmosphere in which everything else will function. If you do not set the tone for your day, circumstances will do it for you. Pressure, urgency, and unexpected challenges will attempt to take control, but prayer places you in a position of authority rather than reaction. When you pray in the morning, you are declaring that your day will be guided, not driven. You are choosing direction over distraction and purpose over pressure. Morning prayer centers your heart before external voices begin to shape your thinking. News, messages, responsibilities, and expectations all carry influence, but prayer ensures that the first influence is divine. What speaks to you first often governs you most. Prayer in the morning creates clarity. It quiets the noise within and sharpens focus. Many people feel overwhelmed not because they have too much to do, but because they have no clear direction. Prayer aligns your priorities so that you can distinguish between what is urgent and what is important. When clarity is established early, decisions become easier throughout the day. You move with intention instead of confusion. Morning prayer also establishes peace before conflict arises. Peace is not something you find after problems are solved. It is something you receive before problems appear. When peace is secured in prayer, challenges lose their power to shake you. You may still face pressure, but it no longer controls your responses. Prayer equips you with emotional stability so you can respond with wisdom rather than impulse. Beginning the day in prayer also strengthens spiritual sensitivity. It tunes your heart to recognize God's guidance throughout the day. You become more aware of moments that require patience, restraint, or courage. Prayer sharpens discernment, helping you avoid unnecessary arguments, wrong decisions, and wasted energy. Many mistakes are not made because of evil intent, but because of spiritual dullness. Morning prayer keeps your spirit alert. Prayer at the start of the day invites God into every detail. It acknowledges that no part of your life is too small for His involvement. Work, relationships, plans, and challenges are all placed under divine oversight. This creates confidence. You walk into meetings, conversations, and responsibilities knowing you are not alone. That awareness changes how you speak, how you listen, and how you act. When morning prayer becomes a habit, it transforms your rhythm of living. The day is no longer something you survive, it becomes something you steward. Instead of reacting to circumstances, you respond from alignment. Instead of being led by fear, you are led by faith. Starting the day in prayer ensures that heaven's order influences earthly activity, creating a foundation of strength, peace, and direction that carries you through whatever the day brings. God's provision goes far beyond what the eyes can see. Many people limit the idea of supply to material things, such as money, food, or opportunities, but the most critical needs in life are often invisible. Strength to endure, wisdom to choose correctly, peace to remain stable, and discernment to avoid danger are just as necessary as physical provision. When God supplies all needs, He addresses the whole person, not just external circumstances. Prayer opens your life to receive both the seen and the unseen dimensions of His provision. Often, the unseen needs are the ones that determine the outcome of visible situations. You may have resources, but lack clarity and confusion, and lead to poor decisions. You may have opportunities, but lack wisdom, and that can lead to regret. You may have success, but lack peace, and success without peace becomes a burden. God understands that provision without inner stability is incomplete. That is why He supplies what cannot be purchased, borrowed, or earned. Unseen provision often works quietly, shaping outcomes without drawing attention. to itself. Protection is one of these hidden supplies. Many dangers are avoided not because of luck, but because of divine intervention. Delays, cancellations, and closed doors are sometimes God's provision in disguise. Without prayer, these moments can feel like frustration, but with understanding, they become evidence of care. God often supplies safety before He supplies success. God also supplies emotional and mental strength. Life has seasons that require endurance rather than escape. In those moments, the ability to remain steady is itself a form of provision. Prayer strengthens the inner person so that external pressure does not produce internal collapse. This strength allows you to stand firm when circumstances do not immediately change. It reminds you that God is at work even when results are not visible. For another unseen need God supplies is timing. Many people struggle not because they lack opportunity, but because they act at the wrong moment. Divine timing protects you from rushing into situations that are not ready or staying too long in seasons that have ended. Prayer. Sensitivity to timing increases. You begin to sense when to move, when to wait, and when to let go. This awareness saves you from unnecessary loss and disappointment. God also supplies guidance through inner conviction. Sometimes the greatest provision is a warning, a pause, or a redirection. These quiet nudges prevent major mistakes. Without prayer, these signals can be ignored or misunderstood. Prayer sharpens your ability to recognize God's voice among many competing influences. It trains you to trust direction even when it does not make immediate sense. When you understand that God supplies both seen and unseen needs, gratitude deepens. You begin to thank Him not only for what you receive, but for what you are spared from. You recognize that His provision is comprehensive, intentional, and personal. This awareness builds trust and confidence, allowing you to rest in the knowledge that nothing essential to your life is overlooked by God. True dependence on God is not weakness, it is the doorway to supernatural provision. Many people strive to appear strong by relying solely on their own abilities, yet human strength has limits. When those limits are reached, frustration and fear begin to surface. Dependence on God shifts the weight of life from human effort to divine empowerment. It acknowledges that while effort is required, the outcome is ultimately sustained by God. This understanding releases the pressure to control everything and opens the heart to receive what only God can provide. Supernatural provision is activated when surrender replaces self-sufficiency. As long as a person believes they can manage life on their own, they unconsciously block divine involvement. God does not force His help where independence is defended. Dependence invites partnership. It creates space for God to work beyond human calculation and expectation. When you surrender your need to control outcomes, you begin to experience provision that cannot be explained by logic alone. Dependence on God also reshapes the way you approach challenges. Instead of being intimidated by obstacles, you view them as opportunities for God's power to be revealed. Fear loses its grip because the focus shifts from the size of the problem to the greatness of the provider. This does not mean challenges disappear, but they no longer define your confidence. You move forward with assurance, knowing that your supply is not limited to what you can see or measure. Supernatural provision often flows through obedience. Dependence sharpens your sensitivity to direction, even when that direction seems unusual. God's instructions are not always convenient, but they are always purposeful. When you trust God enough to follow His guidance, provision follows obedience. Many breakthroughs are delayed not because God is unwilling, but because trust has not yet matured into action. Dependence turns listening into movement. Relying on God also produces contentment. Contentment is not complacency, it is peace rooted in trust. You can pursue goals without anxiety because your security is not tied to immediate results. This inner stability allows you to remain faithful in small steps, knowing that God's provision unfolds progressively. Supernatural supply is often released in stages, requiring continued trust rather than instant gratification. Dependence also protects you from burnout. When you carry life alone, exhaustion is inevitable. Prayer restores perspective and renews strength. It reminds you that you are supported by a source that never tires. This awareness sustains endurance over long seasons. You learn to work diligently while resting inwardly, confident that God is actively involved in every detail. As dependence deepens, faith grows stronger. You begin to expect provision rather than fear lack. Hope becomes steady, not fragile. Trust becomes natural, not forced. When God is fully trusted, provision flows in ways that surpass human limitation. Life becomes less about survival and more about alignment with a source that never fails, supplying exactly what is needed at the right time.